Welcome back everyone. I'm your host, and these are the scariest places you should never trespass. Our first story comes from Reddit user Bearded Man of Kent. I won't go too deep into this one because it is quite long, but the original post can be found below if you're interested in reading it. Anyway, here's the story. I used to live near a village, and there was a derelict church on the outskirts of it that my friends and I would often pass on our way to the woods. It was the typical old stone building with a graveyard surrounding it. In front of the church was a similarly ancient stone well, and whenever we passed it, we could hear a steady click coming from inside. It sounded like fingernails on stone. So naturally, my morbid curiosity got the better of me, and I decided that I needed to find out what was going on. My friends wanted to come along, but I told them it was probably nothing and to just let me investigate on my own. As I got closer to the well, I could hear the clicking getting louder. I looked down and realized that it was coming from directly underneath me. I looked up and down the lane to make sure that I wasn't being watched, then reached down into the darkness and felt around for the stones that lined the bottom of the well. I managed to find them and slid them aside to reveal a small opening. With great difficulty, I lowered myself into the hole and soon found that I was inside a dry tunnel. I switched my phone's torch on and looked around. All I could see was the wall in front of me and darkness behind me. After about 20 seconds of shuffling around, I realized that the clicking noise was coming from deeper inside the tunnel. With some more maneuvering, I managed to squeeze past the obstacle and found myself inside what seemed to be a large chamber. When I switched my torch on, I saw that it was pitch black. I couldn't see anything except for what appeared to be a staircase leading down into more darkness. Without thinking, I started to walk down the stairs, but after a few steps, I felt my foot give way and I fell. The fall must have been about 10 or 15 feet, and when I hit the ground, the wind was knocked out of me and I lay there gasping for breath. As I sat up, I noticed that the sound of the clicking was now extremely loud and coming from above me. As I looked up, I saw another set of stairs directly in front of me and the faintest outline of light at the top of them. I walked over and began climbing upwards. When I finally reached the top, I could see that the chamber was much larger than I originally thought, and the clicking sound was growing louder and closer. Suddenly, I heard a very faint whisper. I stopped and strained to listen. It happened again. This time it was a little louder. "Hello," it said. "Hello," I replied, hoping that whoever or whatever was down there could hear me. There was no reply. It took me a couple of minutes to realize that I was still holding my flashlight in front of me, and in my haste, I had completely blocked the entrance to the tunnel. I stepped back and shone the light into the opening. As I did, I heard a scraping sound and the whisper again, this time very close to me. "Hello," it said. "Hello," I replied. With the flashlight in one hand, I reached out to feel the wall beside me, hoping to find some way out of this place. My fingers touched something wet and slimy. I pulled back and shone the light on it. All I saw was a thin black line running along the wall. The whispering started again. "Hello," it said. "Hello," I replied. "Help me," it said. "Help me," I repeated. Then it started to scream. The screaming suddenly stopped. The silence was deafening. I stood there paralyzed with fear. Then the scratching started again. It grew louder and more frantic. The black line moved. It rose upwards, dripping with moisture and alive with movement. It slithered towards me and opened its mouth to reveal rows upon rows of sharp teeth. I screamed and stumbled backwards. The creature slithered further out and snarled at me. I backed away until I hit the stairs. I turned and ran, scrambling down the steps as fast as I could. As I fell, I lost my grip of the flashlight, and it fell from my numb fingers. The last thing I remember is the darkness swallowing everything. Our next story comes from Reddit user Mr. Lucky 786. My friends and I were riding our bikes home from school, and we decided to take a shortcut through a wealthy neighborhood. We rode past a house that we knew the owners did UNT like us, loitering around, and they had chased us away a few times before. Out of pure mischief, we decided to ride onto the property and see what we could find. We rode past a 4-car garage and around the side of the house and into the backyard. There we found 3 of the most expensive cars you can buy: a Ferrari, a Bentley, and a Porsche. All 3 cars were stripped apart, clearly stolen. It didn't take long for us to assume that someone lived on the property. We went to the back corner of the yard where we found a camper. We knocked on the door and introduced ourselves and asked if the owner was there. No answer. We knocked again and yelled that we were going to call the cops if he didn't answer. Still no answer. We were getting pissed off at this point, so we decided to search the property a bit more. We walked past the camper and into the shadow of a large shed. The stench of rotting flesh made us gag. My friend decided to open the door and check it out. Inside, we saw 2 people sitting. One was a woman who looked to be in her late 50s, with wild, tangled hair and vacant eyes. The other was a man who had no face. Well, not in the sense of him being faceless, but more that his entire face was covered in a sickly gray paste. He stared at us with his blank eyes and slowly raised his head. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but only made a sucking sound. We screamed and ran out of the shed. My friend closed the door and we ran as hard as we could, making it all the way to the main road before stopping to catch our breath. When we turned to look back, we saw the faceless man standing at the edge of the trees staring at us. The woman was nowhere to be seen. My friends and I were never quite the same after that day. To this day, we still look over our shoulders when we hear footsteps behind us. We assume that the faceless man was the owner of the property, but nobody ever moved in, and the house has remained abandoned. Years later, the police found the remains of multiple victims in the shed. Our next story comes from Reddit user Jess21. My friends and I used to sneak into McKinney Quarry when we were younger. The quarry is an old limestone quarry that's now been filled in and turned into a swimming hole. It's surrounded by high cliffs, which we liked to jump off of. One time we went to the quarry, we were caught by the lady who lives on the grounds. She's known for chasing kids out of the quarry and has even been called the quarry witch. She yelled at us and told us to get out of there, saying that she'd call the cops and that we'd be looking at jail time. Scared, we left the premises and stayed away for a couple of weeks. We decided to go back, figuring that she wouldn't catch us if we went at night. When we arrived, we were shocked to see that the gate had been opened. Thinking that it was our lucky day, we headed to the cliffs to jump off of them. Moments later, we heard a blood-curdling scream and turned to see the lady standing at the top of the cliffs holding a shotgun. She pointed the gun at us and fired twice, yelling, "Get out of here, you bastards! Get out of here!" The bullets whizzed past our heads, kicking up pebbles and rocks. We ran as fast as we could and barely made it over the hill when we heard another shot. The bullet ricocheted off a rock and landed mere inches from our heads. We turned around to see the woman standing at the top of the cliff, aiming the gun at us. She fired, but this time she missed. We kept running until we got to the main road, where we stopped to catch our breath. When we turned around to look back, we saw the woman standing at the quarry, shaking her fist at us. She fired the gun 3 more times into the air. The shots echoed off the tall quarry walls, sending birds flying into the night sky. We don't know how long we stood there watching her, but eventually she walked back inside the quarry, and we made our way home. Our next story comes from Reddit user Andrew M. Smith. A local abandoned mansion at the end of our street had been empty for years. It was built in 1927 and was still filled with the original furniture, wallpaper, and even newspapers from 1997. While exploring the mansion, we found a room stacked with old newspapers dating back to the year it was built. We also found a locked cabinet, which we pried open to find that it was full of old family photos. On the other side of the room, we found a door with claw scratches all over it. My brother tried opening it, but it wouldn't budge. On the other side of the room, we found 5 chairs arranged in a perfect circle, free of all the dust that coated the rest of the mansion. It was as if it had been polished only yesterday. At the far end of the room, we found a door which we hadn't noticed before. It was slightly ajar. My brother and I froze as we heard a loud bang. It sounded like a book falling over on the stairs. The sound of footsteps echoed across the floor above. The bang came again, followed by a crash. Someone was moving around upstairs. We were frozen with fear as we heard the doorknob begin to rattle. It was slowly creaking, but it was clear that someone or something was trying to come down the stairs. We turned and ran, squeezing through a small window to escape into the night. After we got home, we learned that some strangers had been spotted entering the mansion that night. Rumor has it that they were part of a cult and that they used the mansion to perform rituals. And that's why